Today we're going to be looking at the poem called Poem of Return, and you can really understand what the poem is about just by looking at the title. Somebody is returning. Where is he returning? Well, the speaker is returning to his home country, which is Angola. Why? Because he had to go into exile for his own safety while Angola was fighting against the Portuguese rule during the Angolan War, which took place between 1961 and 1974. Jofre Rocha, not his actual name, it's a pseudonym for his real name is Roberto de Almeida. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but he produced 22 literary works written in Portuguese, including this one. This one poem has been translated into English under that name, that pseudonym. Just to give you a little bit of background, which I haven't mentioned already, in June 1961 he had to leave Angola for Lisbon in Portugal. He was a nationalist fighting for the independence of Angola. He was detained in prison. His political activity saw him sentenced to 18 months in jail. And if we look at the summary of the poem, if we have to summarize it, we can really look at the first two lines. The speaker is contemplating his upcoming return to his country. He mentions that it's the land of exile and silence, which suggests that he wasn't really happy there. Why was he not happy there? Because there was a war going on there. But that he is not a hero and that he does not deserve any celebration when he arrives. He describes the things that he missed while he was away, and we'll look at that now. But it's clear that he feels pretty guilty about his countrymen and women suffering under Portuguese rule and the torment, and he was in exile in another country. And so the people that were in the country, they're the ones that deserve the celebration, the praise for fighting. But he sees himself as not a hero, as just somebody that was kind of in hiding. He makes it quite clear that the real heroes are the ones who stayed and fought against the oppression. He's writing about lost opportunities, mourning, sadness brought about by the colonialism, the exile, and the war. And you'll see that the poem is 14 lines long, but it's not a sonnet. It doesn't possess the characteristics of a sonnet. It's just 14 lines. Alright, let's just have a look. Okay, so we'll come back to this stuff at the top here. Obviously there's a lot that can be spoken about this poem, and I haven't been able to put every annotation possible on this piece of paper. I've written as small as I can, but I'm hoping that it will help you get an understanding of what the poem is all about. Okay, so as I mentioned, the first two lines starts with a sort of couplet which is summarizing the content of the poem. He makes an appeal when I return. In other words, he's not there yet, but when he does return there should be no celebration. He's been forced for his own safety to be in exile. And why? Because of the Angolan War. His voice was silenced in his own country. Exile, it was just a place where you live that's not your place of birth. And when I return from the land of exile, excuse me, do not bring me flowers. He's not wanting any celebration at all. As an activist in Angola, he had to leave so that his voice could be heard in the world, but it remained silent in his own country. The word land over here underscores the vastness of the silence which he had experienced. Away from his own land, of course, he feels he has to live in complete silence. Let's move on to the next stanza. Now I've written here, the rest of the poem is a listing of all the things that the speaker has missed about his home while in exile, and what he would prefer to have rather than flowers. Okay, there's a blue bracket here, I'll come back to that just now. Bring me rather all the dews. So now this is an imperative, it's a command, it's a statement. This is what he wants you or the people to do. He says, bring me rather, instead of the flowers, all the dews the tears of dawns which witnessed the dramas. So if you think about the dews, that is quite a soft image of literal dew at dawn, um, quite a picturesque kind of mental image that we have there. Because remember, he's going to say the good and the bad. He just wishes that he was in Angola at the time and that he didn't go into exile. So the positive would be the dews. That's nice. You wake up, you see the dew. But then you get the tears of dawns. Well, with each new day, it was a sad start to the day because the people of Angola, it would be just another day under Portuguese rule and the suffering that goes with it. The dramas need to be seen within the context of the guerrilla war that was being fought. The drama is a play, so see this word. How do we say? It's suggesting all the stories that are playing out and of which he is not a part of. He's not there to cry or participate in what is happening. The dramas are witnessed only by the dawn. And of course we've got some personification there as well. Dawns having the ability to cry with tears. The speaker is not there to weep or participate in what is happening. But the people of the land, of course, were. Then we've got another bring again, because he's saying this is also what I want. In place of the flowers or the celebration. That repetition also makes it quite insistent, it's like if you think of asking somebody again and again to do something for you, he means like he's really pleading. He wants you to do it. It's the command continuing. Bring me the immense hunger for love and the plaint of tumid sexes in star-studded night. Okay, that hunger for love. So what type of love are we talking about here? We can break that down and just say, okay, for family, because he wouldn't have been able to love his family at his home country because he wasn't there. That love that you have for your friends, the companionship, the camaraderie, and then of course the love for the land as well, which we spoke about earlier in the first stanza. That's what he wants. And he also wants the plaint. Plaint means a cry or lamenting of tumid sexes, swollen sexes, in star-studded night. That sexes mean lots of sex, multiple sexes, in star-studded night. Star-studded, quite obviously a picturesque sort of romantic image of a sky filled with stars. The sky, being part of the land that he missed as well. And so there's definitely a sexual love there with a romantic partner. And the cry and the lamenting of the noises, I suppose, when people are passionate during sex. And I've said plaint or cries made during the act of sex. Okay, so let's not try and hide about it. That is what it is. There again, I've written this repetition makes it insistent, and I've highlighted the bring. Those imperatives, those commands, continuing. Bring me the long night of sleeplessness, with mothers mourning their arms bereft of sons. Okay, we've got some alliteration going here. I don't think I've actually written on the side here, but we've got mothers mourning, sexes star-studded, dawn, dramas, dews. Okay, and one of the type of questions that the examiners like to ask is, explain the effect of the alliteration in line 10 or whatever. Now sometimes the sound that repetition is making can be associated with the sound of the content of the subject matter, but it's not always the case, and most of the time it's not the case. And so you're going to have to try and figure out now how you're going to answer that question. And I always say, think about what that line is trying to explain. What is the main message? What is the poet trying to get across there? And whatever that message is, think about how that alliteration is drawing us into that line. It's making it memorable. It's making us see repetition or a pattern of some sort, or emphasizing a letter or a sound. And by doing that, it's drawing the attention to the matter at hand, whatever it is that is being discussed. Okay, so bring me the long night of sleeplessness. Okay, there would be nights where Mothers wouldn't be able to sleep. Why? Because their sons had gone into war and died or were still fighting. Mothers were mourning. And of course, people were just so unhappy. There was so much unrest and violence and poverty, and it was just a horrible time. So, of course, you're going to have sleepless nights. And I've written there the assonance here of lessness, the E there, draws out the night. Sleeplessness, that's quite a long sound. That word is a long word. So it forces you to draw it out, and because the night is going to be long, because you're not going to be able to sleep, the assonance makes sense there in that sense. Sorry. Um, Mothers mourning, of course, because their sons have died. Their arms bereft of sons. Bereft means you don't have it, it's lost, it's been taken away. They can't hold their son because he's dead or he's fighting in the war. Sons, plural, because the immense number of men, and particularly young men as well, who went to fight against the Portuguese. So it's not just about one mother losing her son, it's about the many, many mothers whose sons were killed fighting for liberation. So we've got the first stanza saying this is the summary of the poem. I'm coming back. I'm not there yet, because when I return, but when I do return, I'm not a hero. I don't want any celebration. Don't bring me any flowers. However, I do want this. Boom, boom, boom. Those three things. How do we know that he wants that? Because he starts with imperatives. Bring me this, bring me this, bring me this. Okay? And we get to the blue bracket again, which I said we would talk about. That blue bracket that I've put there is highlighting a figure of speech that we call anaphora. Anaphora is when you have a repetition of a phrase in a poem. So here, when I return from the land of exile, when I return from the land of exile, even if it's not quite the same, like this says no, do not bring, and this one says do not bring, it's still purposefully done, and we call that an anaphora. So when I return from the land of exile and silence, silence of the soldiers lost, and with them their desires, their hopes, their dreams. There's a number of ways that you can interpret that. Earlier on we spoke about that it was perhaps his voice that was being silenced. Most certainly here we're talking about the dreams and the hopes of those soldiers that have died. Now we've got a double negative here, very interesting. No, do not bring me flowers. Okay, he is emphasizing that he definitely does not want any form of celebration. No, do not do that. Okay. Sorry. Okay, the rejection of the floral tributes, no, he doesn't want them. This ellipsis here, trail off into despair, to give him flowers would of course be absolutely pointless. Then we have another command here to kind of end off the poem. He says, bring me only just this. Okay, only this. So it's the only one thing that I want, and just this, nothing else. All right, and we can see this sort of like last couple of lines here that he's stating this is what he really wants. You know, the request simply only just this. He's highlighting that he wants just one thing. Compare this to the list of things that he does not want. Okay. And of course his request is simple, but it's also impossible, because you can't go back in time, and if people have died, they've died. They're dead. Alright? But anyway, let's just have a look. The last wish of heroes fallen at daybreak. This is what he wants, and only this. The last wish of heroes fallen. They're heroes because they were fighting for liberation. They've fallen because they died. At daybreak. Daybreak, sunrise, we can think of a new day, new beginnings. That literally they used to do the executions. The Portuguese used to do the executions in the morning as well. So we could argue that too. Of course, the men are heroes because they're fighting for freedom. There was support for the guerrillas from Cuba and Russia. The Angolan soldiers were largely under-resourced until 1974, when support was increased. With a wingless stone, we've got alliteration there again, with a wingless stone, interesting uh, metaphor there, a wingless stone. Well, a stone is a sort of weapon, but it doesn't have any power because it's wingless in hand. So the men are dead, they can no longer throw them, therefore the stone has no wings, or it is quite powerless. So those are kind of two interpretations that you can do there. The poem concludes with this pent-up political anger of the soldiers, this last line. Although it also seems weak, the anger transforms into a snake. Think of being confronted by thousands of men with angry snakes coming out of their eyes in order to understand the power of the image. The weapon of anger is added to the stone. The throwing stone, of course, being a violent action, although we can't actually do anything about it now. So where I've said here that the request is simple but also impossible is, if the heroes have fallen, they're dead. So their wishes cannot be fulfilled. But what he's trying to say here is that he wants revenge. And those heroes, their wish was to get freedom. They wanted their country to be free. They wanted the people to be liberated. So what the speaker is saying here is that we've got this thread of anger, was pent up anger due to the injustices that have been going on for over 13 years. That you've got like a snake coming out of your eyes, and a snake is seen as something evil and dangerous and sinister almost. So he's saying that that wish of the heroes to have justice, that's exactly what he wants, and remember, he's not here yet, because it says when I return, but when he does return, he's saying, I want justice. All right. And I've said here, think of being confronted by thousands of men with angry snakes coming out of their eyes. Quite a scary image. Okay, but that's really describing the pent-up frustration and anger. A little summary here on the left-hand side. So, and I did mention this, main theme of the poem, lines 3 to 10, reasons why the speaker should not be given flowers. Lines 11 to 14 states what the speaker wants, to be able to honor the last wishes of the dead. The flowers are a symbol of his longing to return home, but to receive no tributes when he does. He is not a hero because he wasn't there during the war. Even though he was a political activist, the people on the ground, the residents, the people of Angola were the ones that were suffering day in and day out, and they are the ones who actually deserve praise, not him. Coming back to the top of the poem here that I said we would be looking at. If we look at the poem and we want to just make some points about it, we can see that it's written in first person, because when I return, and then we know that this is the speaker talking about himself. The tone, what is the tone of the poem? How does the poet feel, or the speaker feel about the subject matter? Well, it's a sense of longing. He wants to come home. He's looking forward to coming home, and he wishes that he hadn't missed out on all these things. But also regretful because he doesn't feel like a hero, but also that he was sent into exile in the first place. Tone can also be angry, particularly in the last stanza of the poem. So when you get asked about a question about tone, don't just narrow your thoughts to the whole poem. And, don't try and just find one word for the whole poem. Sometimes the tone can change. The tone for stanza 1 can be different to the tone in stanza 2, for example. What is the theme? Sorry. The theme is the lost opportunity, that he didn't have the opportunity to experience all these things, lost experience as well. And yeah, that is pretty much it, guys. I hope that helps you. We've got enjarment here, lines running one onto the other. As you can see, bring me the immense hunger for love and the plaint. So the sentence continues over more than one line. Um, and it's written in free verse. So there's no set rhyme scheme. Alright guys, I hope that helped.